Welcome to Celeb Club. All your favorite stars are here. Sometimes a single weekend can change everything. For Justin Baldoni, this weekend may have been that moment. For so long, the story around him felt heavy, full of whispers and doubt. Each headline carried weight, each rumor left a mark. And yet through it all, there was always a question. Would there ever be a turning point? Would the truth ever rise above the noise? Now explosive new evidence has come forward, and it feels like the ground beneath this story has shifted. For Justin, it is more than a legal fight. It is his name, his future, and his place in the world he has worked so hard to be part of. For Blake Lively, it is also more than headlines. It is her voice, her strength, and her fight to be understood. This is not just Hollywood drama. This is about two lives caught in a storm bigger than they imagined. A storm that has captured millions of eyes and millions of hearts. And now we stand at the edge of a moment that could change everything. Every story has a beginning, and this one starts with two people who built their names in very different ways. Justin Baldoni is known to many as an actor, a filmmaker, and a voice of inspiration. He grew from roles on television to directing films that touched hearts around the world. His career was not only about fame, it was about purpose. He wanted to tell stories that mattered, stories that carried hope and healing. For many fans, Justin was more than just another face on screen. He was someone who spoke about compassion, kindness, and what it means to be human. On the other side, we see Blake Lively. From the moment she appeared in Gossip Girl, she became a name everyone recognized. To the world, she was stylish, confident, and unstoppable. But behind the glamour, Blake worked hard to step beyond one role and prove that she could shine in film, fashion, and even in using her platform for causes she believed in. She became a figure people admired, not just for beauty, but for strength. For years, their paths seemed separate. Justin was carving his world in directing, and Blake was carrying her career forward with the power of a leading actress. But Hollywood has a way of bringing stories together, and soon their names would stand side by side in ways no one had imagined. At first, it was about art and creativity, a film project that promised something emotional and moving. Fans were excited. The industry was watching. But what began with promise would later turn into conflict. A conflict so sharp that it would spill from film sets into courtrooms and into every corner of the media. This background matters because to understand the turning point of this weekend, we must first understand the journey that led here. These are not just celebrities. These are people whose careers, reputations, and even personal identities have been pulled into a storm they never planned for. And now, as the world watches, both Justin and Blake find themselves at the heart of one of the most emotional battles in Hollywood. Today in Hollywood, some meetings feel like destiny. Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively came from different worlds, yet their paths crossed in a way that felt powerful at first. It began with the promise of a story, a film that was meant to touch millions, a project that carried both risk and hope. For Justin, it was a chance to prove himself not only as a director, but as a storyteller who could bring out raw emotion on screen. For Blake, it was another chance to step into a role that could show her depth, her strength, and her growth as an actress. At first, the conflict between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively was quiet. It lived in small moments that most outsiders would never notice. A disagreement about direction, a clash of vision, a feeling that voices were not being valued. But in Hollywood, silence rarely stays hidden. Slowly, those quiet moments began to grow louder until the tension could no longer be contained. The whispers began to reach the press. Stories leaked out of production, and soon the film was no longer just a film. It became a battlefield of opinions. Some sided with Justin believing in his vision as a director. Others sided with Blake trusting her instincts as an actress who knew the weight of the role she carried. What should have been art turned into an argument that spilled far beyond the cameras. For Justin, the dream project he had poured his heart into was slipping away. Every article, every headline seemed to twist his name into something darker. For Blake, the role that could have been another shining chapter in her career now felt surrounded by shadows she could not control. The conflict reached the public with a force neither of them could stop. Social media added fuel to the fire. Fans debated endlessly. Some defended Justin with passion, others stood fiercely with Blake. Every post, every video, every comment seemed to widen the divide. And with each passing day, the story grew heavier, pressing on both of them in ways that went far beyond career. Behind the scenes, the pressure became unbearable. What began as creative differences turned into legal discussions. Words like contract, lawsuit, and evidence began to replace words like art and vision. The dream of collaboration was gone. In its place was a storm that threatened to consume both of them. It was no longer just about a movie. It was about truth and reputation. It was about careers built over years now standing at risk. And as the world watched this conflict rise higher, one question lingered in every mind. How far would this go? At the beginning, it was filled with excitement. Cameras rolled, scripts were studied, and fans waited for the magic that was supposed to follow. On the surface, it looked like two professionals chasing the same dream. But underneath, there were quiet cracks forming. Misunderstandings grew into tension. Small disagreements began to echo louder. And slowly, what once felt like collaboration started to feel like a storm. The industry can be unforgiving. Rumors travel faster than truth. Every glance, every silence, every decision was whispered about and magnified. Soon the story was no longer about the film. It was about them. Headlines painted pictures that neither of them fully recognized. Social media built its own version of events, each post, and each thread twisting the story into something heavier than reality. For Justin, the weight began to press down. For Blake, the spotlight burned brighter than ever. Both were caught in a cycle they could not easily escape. What began as art had now turned into conflict. A conflict that would not only follow them, but define them in the eyes of millions. This is where the battle truly began. Not on set, not in the script, but in the fragile space where trust broke down and voices were no longer heard. And from here, the journey would only grow more intense, leading them toward the revelations that shook the world this weekend. At first, the conflict between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively was quiet. It lived in small moments that most outsiders would never notice. A disagreement about direction, a clash of vision, a feeling that voices were not being valued. But in Hollywood, silence rarely stays hidden. Slowly, those quiet moments began to grow louder until the tension could no longer be contained. The whispers began to reach the press. Stories leaked out of production, and soon the film was no longer just a film. It became a battlefield of opinions. Some sided with Justin believing in his vision as a director. Others sided with Blake trusting her instincts as an actress who knew the weight of the role she carried. What should have been art turned into an argument that spilled far beyond the cameras. For Justin, the dream project, he had poured his heart into was slipping away. Every article, every headline seemed to twist his name into something darker. For Blake, the role that could have been another shining chapter in her career now felt surrounded by shadows she could not control. The conflict reached the public with a force neither of them could stop. Social media added fuel to the fire. Fans debated endlessly. Some defended Justin with passion, others stood fiercely with Blake. Every post, every video, every comment seemed to widen the divide. And with each passing day, the story grew heavier, pressing on both of them in ways that went far beyond career. Behind the scenes, the pressure became unbearable. What began as creative differences turned into legal discussions. Words like contract, lawsuit, and evidence began to replace words like art and vision. The dream of collaboration was gone. In its place was a storm that threatened to consume both of them. It was no longer just about a movie. It was about truth and reputation. It was about careers built over years, now standing at risk. And as the world watched this conflict rise higher, one question lingered in every mind. How far would this go? When tension in Hollywood spills into the courts, it becomes something far greater than gossip. It becomes a fight where every word, every piece of paper, and every memory can shape the future. For Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, that moment came sooner than many expected. What began as disagreements on set now stood before lawyers, judges, and the unforgiving eye of the public. Courtrooms strip away glamour. There are no red carpets, no flashing lights, no cheering crowds. There's only silence, tension, and the sound of truth being tested. For Justin, this was a painful shift. He had dreamed of telling stories that brought people together, yet now his own story was fractured and under attack. For Blake, the courtroom was another stage, but not one she ever wanted. Instead of scripts, there were legal filings. Instead of costumes, there were strategies. The media followed closely. Every court date became a headline. Every statement became a breaking news alert. Outside, the courthouse cameras waited, catching even the smallest expressions, as though they held a secret to everything. Inside, the court lawyers painted different pictures. Each side fought to control the narrative. Each side fought to protect a future that felt uncertain. Fans watched from afar, their emotions divided. Some prayed for Justin, believing he was caught in unfair judgment. Others rallied behind Blake, seeing her as a woman standing strong in the face of pressure. Social media became a battlefield of voices, hashtags, trending in waves of support and anger. The cost was more than legal fees. It was emotional. Careers were hanging by a thread, reputations bruised, futures uncertain. Every hearing, every motion, every ruling carried a weight that pressed on their shoulders. What once was art had become war. And yet in the middle of this storm, both Justin and Blake held on to one hope, that the truth would eventually be seen. But truth is not always simple. Truth in the courtroom is shaped by evidence, timing, and perception. And it was here in this fragile space that the battle would take a turn that no one expected. There are weekends that pass quietly and leave no trace. And then there are weekends that change everything. For Justin Baldoni, this weekend may be remembered as the moment when the story surrounding him took a sharp turn. For months, he carried the weight of accusations, the sting of headlines, and the shadow of doubt. It felt endless, as if no matter what he said or did, the tide was always against him. Fans wondered if there was any hope left, if there was any chance the truth could shine through. And then the revelations arrived. Documents were unsealed. Messages long hidden became public. Texts, emails, and records suddenly painted a picture that was far more complex than the simple story many had believed. The world discovered that there may have been more happen behind the scenes than anyone realized. For Justin, this moment was not just about evidence. It was about breathing again after months of drowning. For the first time, there was something concrete, something he could point to and say, here is proof, here is my side. The relief was mixed with fear, because new evidence does not only protect, it also exposes. Every word in those documents could be dissected, every detail could be twisted. Yet, even with that risk, this weekend felt different. For Blake, the revelations carried weight too. In every battle, new truths come forward, and each one can cut deep. She too faced the shock of seeing private exchanges made public. She too had to brace herself for what the world would now say and how it would shape her image, her strength, and her story. The reaction was immediate. Media outlets rushed to cover the revelations. Headlines declared a bombshell, a twist, a game changer. Social media exploded. Fans flooded timelines with debates, anger, and support. Some shouted that Justin had finally been vindicated. Others argued that the evidence was only part of a larger picture. The noise was deafening, yet one thing was certain. The weekend had shifted the story. The question now was simple yet heavy. Was this the turning point Justin had been waiting for? Or was it only another chapter in a battle with more storms still ahead? The revelations did not stay inside the courtroom. They spilled out into the world like fire racing across dry ground. Within hours, news outlets everywhere carried the story. Headlines screamed about shocking proof and sudden twists. Talk shows debated every detail. Podcasts dissected each message line by line. The case of Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively was no longer just a Hollywood dispute. It had become a cultural conversation. For Justin, the sudden wave of attention felt both empowering and terrifying. After months of feeling silenced, he finally had evidence that seemed to give weight to his voice. Yet, with that evidence came endless questions. Every word was examined. Every phrase was debated. The relief of being heard was mixed with the fear of being misunderstood again. For Blake, the spotlight grew even harsher. The world was not only watching her career anymore, it was examining her choices, her actions, her silence. Even people who once adored her on screen now felt entitled to judge her in ways no one should face. She stood tall, but the storm was relentless. Every headline carried her name, every camera searched for her face. And then came the voices of the public. Social media erupted into waves of passion. Supporters of Justin shared hashtags declaring justice at last. Supporters of Blake defended her fiercely, calling her strong and unshaken. Arguments spread through comment sections, Twitter threads, TikTok videos, and YouTube reactions. Each side spoke with fire. Each side believed they were defending truth. But in the middle of this frenzy, one thing became clear. The world was not simply watching a legal battle. They were watching two human beings stripped bare in front of millions. Two lives pulled into a storm larger than themselves. And as the noise grew louder, the question became impossible to ignore. Would either of them ever walk away from this unchanged? In the past, courtroom battles stayed behind closed doors. But today, nothing stays hidden for long. Social media has turned every case into a public trial. And for Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, this trial played out not only in front of judges, but also in front of millions of screens. The revelations that surfaced this weekend spread through the internet like lightning. Within minutes, screenshots were shared across platforms. Posts went viral with captions filled with emotion and outrage. On TikTok, creators broke down every detail for their followers. On Twitter, hashtags trended with fiery debates. On Instagram stories, fans posted their own interpretations. YouTube commentators rushed to release videos, capturing the mood of the moment. For Justin, this digital wave was overwhelming. Some fans spoke of him with compassion, believing he had finally been given a chance to prove his truth. They called him resilient, strong, and misunderstood. Their voices gave him strength in the middle of chaos. But there were others who questioned everything, doubting his intentions and twisting the evidence into new accusations. Each notification, each tag was a reminder that his life was being judged by strangers in real time. For Blake, the internet was no softer. Supporters lifted her name, calling her a woman standing tall under fire. They reminded the world of her career, her talent, and her resilience. Yet, critics spoke with sharp words, accusing her of being part of something larger and darker. Each comment was a wound, each post a reminder that fame does not protect against cruelty. The power of social media was undeniable. It gave voices to millions who felt connected to a battle they were not part of. It shaped how the story was seen and remembered. In many ways, it became more powerful than the courtroom itself. Because while judges decide rulings, the court of public opinion can decide reputations. This weekend proved one truth beyond doubt. In this age, the fight is never just about law. It is about hearts, minds, and the endless echo of voices online. For Justin Baldoni, this weekend did not just bring evidence. It brought